All right, Shalom Aleichem, Erev Tov. Make sure there's a memory card. Perfect. We're going to finish this volume of Shulchan Aruch tonight, B'ezrat Hashem. The new books are already here. I will be giving them out after Pesach, B'ezrat Hashem. If you did not yet pay for your book, please go online and pay for your book. If anybody has any financial difficulties paying for their book, let me know and I will take care of it for you. I ask that you don't buy a book unless you are certain that you're going to be learning with us for the next couple of years. Meaning, if you're just passing through this shiur, please make sure we have enough books for everybody else. And then you're welcome to grab the extras. Siman Memchet, chapter 48 of Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim. This is a very unusual chapter because it does not start with Maran. It starts with a note from the Rama. But let's not get carried away. First and foremost, chapter Memchet, Omerim Parashat Tamid. We say Parashat Tamid. That's the Korban Tamid offering. Ufsuke Korban Shabbat, Omrim etzad Parashat Tamid, and we say Shabbat Psukim near Korban Tamid. Uvo Saif Echad, and there's one Saif. Haga, says the Rama. V'omrim Parashat Tamid. We say Parashat Tamid. V'yesh omrim Seder Ma'aracha. Some say the order of the Ma'aracha. We'll read about that soon. V'ribbon ha'olamim ata tzivitanu, and a certain prayer that's found in your Siddur. V'im efshar le'omro b'tzibur, and if you cannot say it in the community, meaning in a public setting, yechol le'omro b'veto, you could say it in your home alone. V'lechazo Parashat Tamid levad im hatzibur, and then to repeat the Parashat Tamid with the community. V'yichaven b'pam hasheniya kekoreh b'Torah, and the second time, you have in mind that it's not a prayer, it's more of like reading the Torah. V'nahagu hamedakdekim. In your book, it's a little bit different. In your book, they jump Maran in right now. Let me read Maran first. B'Shabbat, on Shabbat, Omrim etzel Parashat Tamid. We say in Parashat Tamid, Pesukei Musaf. So I'm on page 406. The verses of Musaf, the Shabbat. Avalo b'Rosh Chodesh v'Yom Tov, but not on Rosh Chodesh and Yom Tov. Mipnei shekorin b'Torah b'Pesukei Musaf, because we already read in the Torah the verses regarding Musaf. The Rama continues, V'nahagu hamedakdekin. And those who are medakdekim, what's the definition of medakdekim? What's a medakdek? Yeah, very particular. I think they like to translate it as scrupulous, but I don't know what that means. So particular. Someone who's very particular. I mean, those who are very careful in halakha. What do? Says the Rama. Lhit no'e'a. That's two ayins. To move. What does hit no'e'a mean? This. They call it shuckling in Yiddish. Yeah? I don't believe it's an English word, shuckling. I don't think an English person knows what that word is. And is that an English person? I mean, an English-speaking person doesn't know what that is. B'sha'ah shekorim b'Torah, while a person is reading Torah. Dugmat haTorah shnitna here it says birtet, but I think beretet. The Torah was given with shaking, quivering. V'chen b'sha'ah shemitpalim, it's also when we pray, Hashem, based on the verse, Kal atzmotai. Now, even though this really should be kol atzmotai, there is a Sephardic tradition that this word is pronounced kal atzmotai. All of my bones, tomarna, should say Adonai michamocha, Adonai who is like you. What does it mean, all my bones? When I shuckle, all of my bones are involved in my act of tefillah. Says the Rama, it continues one more sentence. Why is it not in your book? Okay. The whole thing here is out of order. ויש אומרים, some say, שמזכירים גם מוסף ראש חודש וכן נוהגים כדי לפרסם שהוא ראש חודש וכן הוא כמובן סימן תף חבל. We'll read this already. I'm with the two lines. So let's back it up a little bit. I have to read it in the order that's printed in your book, so forgive me when I do it that way. Omarim b'chol yom parashat Korban HaTamid. We say every day the Korban HaTamid, the offering of the constant sacrifice to the Beit HaMikdash. V'hu al pi ma she'amru Hazal. And it's based off what our rabbis say in Masechet Megillah. Amar Avraham lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Avraham said in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shema yichatu Yisrael lefanecha. Maybe the Jewish people will sin in front of you. V'ta'aseh lahem k'anshei dor mabul. And you'll do to them what you did to the people of the flood. You'll destroy them. Amar le'elav. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, no, I won't do that. Amar le, Avraham says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Bama eda kireshena. Bame, how will I know that I will truly inherit the land? Amar le tells him, Kechali egla mishuleshet. Take for me egla as a baby cow. Amar lefanav Ribono shel Olam, he says, the Master of the Universe. Tinach, I understand, Bizman she Beit HaMikdash kayam, when the Beit HaMikdash is still standing. Bizman she'en Beit HaMikdash kayam mati alehem, what's going to happen to the Jewish people? You're telling me that they'll survive because they'll offer this baby cow. But what happens when they're no longer in their land and they can no longer offer this baby cow? What will happen? Amar le, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells them, Kvar tikanti lehem seder korbanot. I've already established for them the order of the korbanot. Shekozman shekorin behen, and every time they read the korbanot, מעלה אני עליהם כאילו מקריבים לפני קורבן ואני מוחה להם על כל עוונותיהם. Says the Midrash that HaKadosh Baruch Hu answers back Avraham, don't worry, whenever I cannot be given an offering because there's no Beit HaMikdash, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be listening to us reading Korban HaTamid, and those Korbanot will count as if we brought them. So the whole idea of saying Korbanot in the morning is an idea based off of this Midrash, in which we are understanding that when we read things, it's as if we're actually doing them. We also read these verses that Abaye used to do. Interesting. So Abaye has a yud at the end, and then it's hey and a vav and a hey. You don't want it to sound like you said yud ke vav ke. A person who pronounces that name, not such good things happen to them. So there should be a little bit of a break. Nonetheless, the basic halacha, you don't have to do it. You don't intend to say Shem Hashem. So if you have no intention to say Shem Hashem, you don't actually violate the prohibition of saying Kadosh Baruch Hu's name in a way that shouldn't be done. Yes.
2,000 years ago, when they were doing Kehillat, there was no Siddur, but they were making their Kehillat. They use it Hashem?
That's a good question. You see that when they heard the Shema Meforash, the whole world shook for that. The Yud Ke Vav Ke name, did they pronounce it that way? I don't think so. I don't think that, I have to look, I don't want to answer. I don't think that Am Yisrael said this name, Yud Ke Vav Ke, aside from Adonai.
Like his...
Right, it's kind of like you know your parents' name, but you don't call them by that name.
Yeah.
Same with Am Yisrael. Like, we know what a Kadosh Baruch Hu's name is. When we say Adonai, we're thinking Yud Ke Vav Ke, which don't intend to ever say that name.
Wasn't there a whole thing that we don't know how to pronounce it also?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure somebody said that. But that's like the same person said we don't know how to slaughter the animal and take out the back, or like we don't know how to bake matzot that are soft. The same idea. Yeah. I mean, maybe you don't know, but we know. It's very interesting that people who claim to have a Messiah for everything don't know so many very fundamental things. It's interesting. You don't have to stand up for the Korbanot. וראוי לו לאדם שילמד פירוש סדר קורבנות ומשנות והגמרא שאומר בכל יום קודם פסוק זמרה כדי שיבין מה שאומר ועל ידי כך תחשב לו אמירתם לתלמוד תורה. You should learn what it is that you are saying, that way in the Mishnah and the Talmud, and that way when you say them, you're thinking about them, and it will be considered for you as if we are learning Torah. So that way, right in the morning, the first thing you're doing is you're learning Torah. Look on the top of page 406 in the middle. Minhag Sfaradim vedot mizrach kedat Rabbeinu Arizal. Once again, you find the custom of the Sfaradim, at least when it comes to the Sidur, is to follow the Arizal. Shlo hiskir klal psuke korban musaf Shabbat, shorish Shabbat, charamat psuke pashat korban tamid. He doesn't have any mention of these psuke Shabbat in the services. Nechen v'rosh chodesh v'moadim menogim laskir pasuk korban musaf klal. The Sfaradim don't mention the sacrifice of musaf at all in Rosh Chodesh. The Ashkenazim nagu laskir psuke korban musaf ben Shabbat, ben Rosh Chodesh, ben b'moadim. The Ashkenazim are consistently adding in these parts into the Tevilah. It's a technicality. If you have a Siddur today, you don't need to worry about this.
Well, in the Amidah, they have
all kinds of paragraphs of reading. Right? That's what he's talking about. The next is very interesting about chuckling during Tefillah. Notice Maran didn't say anything. This is only the Rama who's talking. יש נוהגים לנענע גופם לפניהם ואחריהם ואחריהם לפניהם בשעת לימוד תורה ובשעת התפילה. There are people who move their fronts to their backs and their backs to their fronts, literal translation, meaning they move back and forth when they pray. ויש אומרים את some say שבתפילת שמונה עשרה אין נכון לעשות כן. Sometimes when you pray the Amidah, you're not allowed to move. אלא צריך לעמוד בלא תנועה, you have to stand still. כעומד לפני המלך, like somebody who's standing in front of a king. You should know that Sfaradim are quite careful not to shackle during Tefillah. It's almost not a thing. Hava Peretz, if he sees someone in the room shackling during Tefillah, he will actually stop his Amidah, walk over to them, grab them still, and return to his place to do Amidah. In the middle of his Amidah. This is not a gas station here, not a truck stop. It's not a... Stay still. In front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Imagine trying to talk to somebody while doing this. It's really absurd. And to do that to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's even more absurd. Ul Halacha, he says that everything is based on the person, whatever gives them kavanah. I think there's more than subjective kavanah. There's also objectively, what does it look like when you're speaking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and you're doing all kinds of erratic movements? It doesn't end over there, because if it was just shackling, it's fine. People do all kinds of hand movements, all kinds of neck bobbing, all kinds of hands in the air like they're in a mega church on a Sunday, like all kinds of weird things people do. During the Tefillah, it always amazes me that people are willing to do all of that, but to bow down on the floor is considered taboo. Like, oh, that's actually written in the halakha that way, but we're too afraid to do it. Al kol panim, nonetheless, I've skipped a paragraph. Yizaher shlo yina'neh gufo b'tnuot mishunot u'b'tnuot chazakot. Person shouldn't do unusual hand motions or movements, body movements. V'chlo yitnoneh b'ofen shegufo eino na'a ela rak rosho na'a mitzad letzad. You definitely shouldn't do it where your body is still, but your head is like. You ever seen people daven like that? Like their head bobbling doll. That is worse. Why? שמלבד שבעושה כן אינו יכול לכוון כראוי. When you do this, you can't have kavanah in your mind because your mind is wobbling around. But the second, גם אין זה מן הראוי לעשות כן בשעת התפילה שהוא כעומד לפני המלך. It's also not fitting to do that kind of motion in front of a king because you're right now standing in front of the king of the world. Why, for the life of me, is head bobbing more of a problem than body shaking? I don't know why he's like saying, oh, you shouldn't do it because it's disrespectful to Hashem by the head bobbing. Where do we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu cares about you bobbing your head more than he cares about you moving the vertebrae in your back? Like, how do we know that? I don't have an answer.
I would say it seems much more like for lack of a better term, just like an appeasement of an answer. It's like, okay, like you could do this just a little bit, keep it under control, but once you start going crazy, you just like
It's too much.
No, but also like a lot of times you see people like when they do the 3 steps back and do the social like sometimes people do the just head bob.
Right.
Versus doing the actual like.
I saw a video of Lubavitch Rebbe Allah showed me to do that. Yeah, I don't know where he got it from because it's really not.
So it's like if you have that versus like bowing with your body, bowing with your
Right. Right. Okay. There's an interesting footnote here. It's not that important though. Okay, if you want to look at the footnote, you're welcome to look at it yourself. Let's do one more siman, page 409.
What is the rationale argued in opposition
To what?
So, I think a default position would be when you're talking to somebody, you're kind of standing like everybody's talking to a person, you're not.
HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not a person.
No, and I get that. Okay, and so then now the Rama comes around and says it's okay for you to rock back and forth, like it says in Kehillat. We're trying to emulate that.
All my bones should say, okay.
Correct. Okay, but so now and then the counter argument, what I'm reading it to simplify, is just keep it under control. Don't be too ridiculous. To say it in a sentence.
So that's a hard thing to quantify, like don't be ridiculous. Because what I think is ridiculous, clearly you don't think it's ridiculous. You find that the Chachamim are like all the way back torn about this. The Kuzari talks about this. Like early books are talking about this movement during Tefillah. I remember as a kid, I don't remember where, they told me the story about the Vilna Gaon, I think they said about him. That somebody came to the city and they claimed to be married, and they figured out that he wasn't Jewish because he didn't shuckle during davening. And when they saw that, they knew that his neshama was not on fire. He didn't have, because the soul flickers, so you move like your soul flickers. And the Jewish guy clearly didn't have a soul, so he must have been non-Jewish. Understand how the story works? It's like
No.
like one of those stories. We're on page 409. Maran has an interesting halakha. I told you this is like the interesting corner of the Shulchan Aruch. It's a bunch of short, random halachot. Siman Mem Tet. Sheyachol lomar Kriyat Shema ba'al peh. That you can say Kriyat Shema by heart. Why would you not be able to say Kriyat Shema by heart? Very good. Familiar with this? Afal pi dekay malan. Even though we have already learned, it's been established. Devarim shebichtav I ata rashay leomaram al peh. That things that are written down, meaning the Mikra, yes, written in Torah, you're not allowed to say it by heart. You know this halakha? If there's a pasuk, you're not allowed to say it by heart. כל דבר שרגיל ושגור בפי הכל, כגון קריאת שמע וברכת כהנים ופרשת התמיד וכיוצא בהן מותר. But anything which everybody knows how to say it by heart. The things that you know Shema Yisrael. So you're allowed to say those things by heart. In Parashat, it says assuming yes that you say Parashat Tamid every day, and that's why you know all of that. Let's read on page 409 in the middle of the page.
So Rabbi, you're allowed to say certain things, or I thought it was better every time that you say something that you have to read it all.
That's something else. That's about kavanah, what you're saying, Marlene. Here, there's actually rabbinic law instruction not to say Pesukim by heart.
Yeah.
B'masechet Gitin. In Masechet Gitin or Masechet Timura, Darash Rav Yehuda bar Nachmani, Rav Yehuda says, Ktiv, it says, Ketov lechad devarim hele. Write down these words. Uchtiv, ki al pi hadevarim hele. Haketzad, devarim shebichtav, I ata rashay lomram ba'al peh, devarim sheba'al peh, I ata rashay lechodvam. Our rabbis learn from these verses here that the things that are written, you are not allowed to say orally. And the things that are oral, you're not allowed to say verbally. No. You're not allowed to write them down. That's what I meant. It means, give me a fancy word for writing. You cannot write them. I don't have a fancy word for you. So, for example, Torah shebichtav, you're not supposed to say it by heart. And Torah sheba'al peh, you're not supposed to write it down. Now, you remember, obviously, the history of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi writing it down. Why?
Well, because it was going away.
Et la'asod l'Adonai heferu toratecha. That in moments where we have to step up to the plate and do something unusual to save HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Judaism, we can do it even if it's in violation of halakha. Is that a slippery slope? Of course. But not every person can just decide for themselves to violate halakha because they're saving Judaism. This is something that's dealt with quite seriously. Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting idea here. I think it's simple to understand, okay, something that's written down, you shouldn't try to memorize it, you make sure you get it right. But the reverse, I think, is the more complicated one. And the
And why can't you write down oral things?
Correct. And so
Okay.
my idea here is the Greeks were famous for not liking writing things down. They believed in a oral. I don't want to say oral transmission, but like when you would say a story to a person, it wasn't about the Homer went on his Odyssey and did these things. It
Right.
was about telling the story and engrossing people in the story so that they were hearing and being brought to those emotions and to those points with you. And I believe like Plato writes about how it's like bad for people to be writing things down. It's like a shame that we have to do it because we can't like be remembering things. It was all about memory and instilling it inside of you, and not about just recording it for recording.
Right.
I'm wondering if there's a very
there's
idea here.
You know, I'm not an expert in this area of halakha. It would be something interesting to look at, and like what period it came out in, why.
Correct. That's in that time frame as well. It's an amalgam of both ideas. One of them is you need the written stuff that's there, and you also need to have it in you. You know, that's what the Greeks idea is.
Right. That's interesting. You should follow that trail.
Yeah.
And when you find something, no, really, for real, like, chase it down. You know, Chidushim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us insight because sometimes we can see things in ways that other people don't know to look for. Let's see what he wants from us here. So really, all of the tefillah that you know by heart, that you say all the time, you're allowed to say it by heart. Obviously, there's an argument among the Chachamim. So look here. I just want to show you. I'm not going to read it to you. But on page 411. So the question is, why are the things that you know well, why are they exempt from this prohibition of not saying them by heart? So he writes Hashita Ha'alef. That's the first Shita. He writes Hashita Ha'bet. It's the second. On page 412, Hagimel, Hadalid, he has 3 and 4. On page 413, he has 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. On page 414, he's got 9 and 10. And then another paragraph. So basically, he's telling you there's a lot to be said about this topic. There's a lot of people that have been spoken about it, and I don't have anything original to add of my own.
It seems kind of like super subjective because, like, your father, I think, was telling us the story about like in his childhood it was normal for like a 3-year-old to know the
Memorize parasha. Right, so is that considered something?
And now we're like lucky when our kids know the Shema by heart, or something like that.
So that's exactly why you have these 10 shitot, which are all trying to explain like the different reasons for why something would be or not be allowed to be said by heart. Like, yeah, once you understand the logic, I guess you can figure out how to apply it.
I think there's a difference here. When you're talking about it, this is me practicing studying the Pasha, and whether I'm so good that I can practice the whole thing, just right here without a tikkun in front of me, or when you're actually reading the Torah, you have to read every word. You're not allowed to be like, okay, by like I know that sentence, move on to the next. You have to read it. You're not allowed to, just like with the Megillah, you have to read it. You're not allowed to just like, okay, I know the sentence, move to the next one, and just say it.
Right.
So it's the same thing when you're saying that. So that's the question going to the Shema. Like, okay, well, I have this still memorized. Why do I not have to read it?
Some say, but there's an interesting calculation here of like, Shema, for example, is a tefillah that you have to say at a certain time.
Yeah.
So let's say you're not near a siddur, so you're going to miss saying the Shema. No, the prohibition of missing to say Shema is worse than the prohibition of not saying Shema by heart. It's like a miniature et lasod Adonai hefiroto. That's a miniature when you have to do for Hashem, you break halakha. It's like a miniature version of that. Interesting. There's a lot of different ramifications between these 10. And if it wasn't the Thursday before Pesach, I would go through all 10, but I don't want to drag this out. It could be an interesting conversation to have like a standalone shiur, just why versus by heart. I might do that. I might come back here. But why, that would be the important part. On page 416, what about a blind person? A blind person essentially is always saying Pesukim by heart. Hasuma mutar lomar psukim ba'al peh. Page 416. A blind person can say psukim by heart.
Why don't they have dots now that you can follow?
That's the question. It's called Braille. Shemekivan she'i efshar lo b'yan acher, because he has no other way to read. Yesh lomar b'zeh et lasot Adonai yefero toratecha. So this idea is, again, by the way, machloket rishonim. It's not new. Okay.
Well, here's a chidush for that, and practical from my experiences. The person who we've been saying kaddish for, he's been blind for many, many years, and he has a number of svarim in Braille, which I don't know if this existed in the time 500 years ago.
Does Braille change the status of a blind person?
Correct. And one of the examples would be, it would be rare, but maybe it was like his bar mitzvah parsha, he would say the haftarah from his Braille book. You'd look at it and see nothing. He's doing this.
I was thinking if it doesn't change his status, like here he specifies that it's because he has no other way to do it.
And here there is another way.
Saying it for the Kehillat also, that's to make it.
A lot of things. We used to put a cheresh, a deaf person, in the same category as a shoteh and a katan, a crazy person. But we know today that deaf people can communicate. We've reached a place where just because someone can't communicate the way I know how to communicate doesn't mean they're dumb. It doesn't mean they're unable to engage in halakha and tefillah. There's been interesting conversation in Israel, for example, surrounding the status of deaf people in terms of bar mitzvah, aliyot of the Torah, amidah. That now they can read, they can pray, they know it all, but they can't hear. So are they really still in the status of a cheresh, of a deaf person, or not? That's above my league right now. On page...
Braille was invented like in 1824, I think, by this guy Braille. So, yeah, I mean, it's relatively recent. It wouldn't have been available at the time when this was written.
Yeah, I'm talking about now, which is, now that we have these things, does anything change? They're simple scheme to talk about. On page 416. הנוהגים לומר פרשיות קדש לי והיה כביאך בכל יום עם התפילין. What are these verses that you're saying?
It's the tefillin.
So basically our tefillin are made up of how many parashiyot? 4. Right? That's why in the head there's 4 compartments, and on the hand there's 1 with all 4 inside. Because in the tefillin we have these parashiyot, and we read 2 of the 4 during our tefillah, many have the custom to read the other 2 in the morning. Some do it before, some do it after tefillah. It depends if you get there early or late. But they do it all day with their tefillin. They can say it by heart. Because for them, and again, subjective, I guess they're always doing it so often that they know how. But if you're worried about the opinion that says that you're worried about other people, that they're going to see you doing something, then you have to make sure you only say it in front of people who all know Kaddish and Kaddish Livaya Kaviyachab by heart as well.
So we have a member in our Beit Knesset, he is a war veteran, and he has a head injury, so he can't read. He can't really focus. So how would this apply in his situation? So I study with him quite regularly after or before Tefillah on Shabbat. So I'm asking on his behalf and for my knowledge as well.
Well, number 1, just keep studying. So don't stop that. Number 2, those kind of questions I always defer to the rabbi of the Kehillat. I'm not the rabbi there. So they should do what the rabbi there says they should do.
Okay.
And what if they were my Kehillat? Well, I don't answer what if questions. So, B'ezrat Hashem, if it ever becomes an issue, we'll talk about it. Let's read one last final Siman tonight. Siman Nun on page 417. Tam, the reason, Lama omrim Mishnat Ezehu Mekoman. Why do we say this Mishnah of Ezehu Mekoman? You familiar with this? In the morning before Hodu, right? Right, because everybody says it. Kava'u leshnot. There's a rabbi is instituted. It's found, by the way, in the Sidur of Amram Gaon, according to the notes here. To say Parashat HaTamid, after Parashat HaTamid, Perek Ezehu Mekoman. Uvraita de Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael, remember the 13 ways which the Torah studied? And then we say Banei Bet Mikdash, and then Kaddish, and then Hodul Hashem. Right? כדי שיזכה כל אדם ללמוד בכל יום מקרא, משנה וגמרא, דברייתא דרבי ישמעאל, הביא במקום גמרא, שהמדרש כגמרא. It's very interesting that the rabbis instituted that there because that talks about, that includes in it Mikra, Mishnah, and Gemara, and you want to make sure that a person at least learns that much Torah every single day. So look on page 417. במסכת קידושין, מסכת קידושין אמרו על הפסוק, they say about the verse, ושינתם לבניך, you should teach the Torah to your children. אל תקרא ושינתם, אלא ושילשתם. Don't say ושינתם, rather say ושילשתם. When our rabbis do that, are they telling you to misread a word?
No, something else to learn.
Are they learning that from this verse?
No, it's like a
I mean, what is this trick? Like, don't read Al Tikra Halachot, Halachot. Don't say Boni Bonaich Ela Bonaich. This is like, yeah, but it doesn't say that, right? Like at the end, I think she might be moving. At the end, you're saying something wrong. So how do you learn from a misreading of a text? Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Lutzato has an essay about this. I don't know if it's the only answer, but it's a good answer in my opinion. Is that Chachamim already have an oral tradition in their hands. They have all kinds of oral traditions. And that they understood that the best thing possible with oral traditions is to find a way to allude to them, find allusions to them in the actual text of the Torah. And even if they're far-fetched, they never intend for you to say, oh, the reason why we say a person has a portion in the world to come, that's not the point. They know that a person who learns halakha every day has a portion in the world to come. They're trying to find a verse they can plug that into and show you, look, there's some type of basis for this inside of the Torah itself. It's not a proof. So Al Tikra is just a method of showing you something. So don't say Veshinantam, ela Veshilashtam. לעולם ישלש אדם שנותיו, שליש במקרא, שליש במשנה, ושליש בתלמוד. A person should separate their years into threes, and they should learn a third from the Tanakh, a third from the Mishnah, a third from the Talmud. That today would be Tanakh, Talmud, and Halakha. That would be the definitions of those words. ומחמת כן, and because of that, תיקן אברהם גאון, רבי אברהם גאון, instituted, לומר בכל יום קודם פסוקי זמרה, מקרא, משנה ותלמוד. Why? So you could get in all of this as part of your limud Torah. So why isn't Mekoman? Why not like another? What's a random piece to have there? ובחרו בשעת איזה Mekoman מפני שאין באותו פרק מחלוקת, because there's no מחלוקת in the whole chapter. והיא משנה ברורה למשה מסיני, it's clear that this comes from Moshe Rabbeinu Har Sinai. And why do they put it then after Parashat Tamid? Because Talmidei Chamim who learn Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu counted as if they offered offerings to him. And so that's one of the reasons why they chose that. Okay, then afterwards all kinds of other things that people say. Yehuda ben Tema Omer, the Sidurim, they're all in your Sidurim. Yeah, there's no reason. Okay, now we have a minhag to say, Hodo l'Adonai kiru v'shmo, di'u ba'amim alilotav. Right? We say that in the Tefillah. So that minhag, Kodem amirat pesukei zimra. Before you say the pesukei zimra, and remember, the next book of Shulchan Aruch is going to start us off in all the halachot of pesukei zimra. So that's why Maran is talking about that here. Before you say pesukei zimra, omrim pesukei hodu l'Adonai kiru b'shmo. You see these verses. ודוד המלך תיקן לאומם כל השנים שהיה הארון בעירייה. And David HaMelech was the one who instituted this. ואמרו בסדר עולם, and the rabbis told us בסדר עולם, וספר יוחסין, שבזמן תמיד של שחר היו אומרים הודו לאדוני עד ובנביאה אל תרעו, ובזמן תמיד של בין ארבעים היו אומרים שירו לאדוני עד אמן והלל אדוני. So there was a time where all they said was Hodu Hashem until Uvinvei al Tareu. Because of this, I saw Chacham Mordechai Eliyahu writes that if you're short on time, you should say Hodu. Hodu l'Adonai kiru v'shmo diu b'amim ani lo tav, and you should end Uvinvei al Tareu. Stop there. Because originally that's all that they said, and you can do a shortcut by ending over there. Sometimes I do that here. When I see that we're running late and Zman Kiyashama is close, so I cut Hodu over there. ומנהג הספרדים לומר פסוקים אלו קודם ברוך שאמר. Our custom of Sfaradim is to say these verses before ברוך שאמר. שהרי פי אמור לאל, יש לפסוקים אלו שייכות לקורבנות, because as we mentioned above, these פסוקים have connection to the korbanot. לכן יש להסמיכם למעשה הקורבנות, and we read them therefore right after the korbanot. ועוד, and furthermore, שהרי פסוקים אלו אינם מעניין להלל לקדוש ברוך הוא של פסוקי זמרה, ונברך עליהם ברכת ברוך שאמר, שיהיה ברכה להלל של פסוקי זמרה. They're not connected to praising Hashem, these verses. There's no reason to add them there. וכן נהג רבנו האריזל לומר פסוקים אלו קודם ברוך שאמר. And therefore the custom of the Arizal is to say these verses before ברוך שאמר. That's how the Sephardim do it as well. Whether you like it or not, the Sephardic Siddur was influenced very heavily by Kabbalah, and that is how we do it. The Ashkenazim still say first ברוך שאמר, and then הודו להשם כי הוא שמו. ויש מהאשכנזים שנהגו לומר הודו לאדוני אחר ברוך שאמר, ובכל מקום יעשו כמנהגם. ובכל מקום אשכנזי שרצה לשנות מנהגו לאומר קודם ברוך שאמר, רשאי לעשות כן. So you should leave Ashkenazim alone for doing that, but if Ashkenazi wants to change his minhag to say the hodu before, it's okay, you could help him do that. Okay?
It's allowed. They do that on Shabbat. They don't do it during the week.
What?
The hodu.
But they do it after Baruch Shema.
Yeah, after Baruch Shema.
Yeah.
And the reason they said that if you want to change it, you can, is because the Baruch Shema until you Shabbat is supposed to be one closed thing. One beracha.
Right, beginning and ending. That's right. Acham Mizmor David, top of page 420. We're 2 pages away from the end, guys. Acham Mizmor, Uchad Agditani, Owim Pa'amayim, Adonai Melech, Adonai Malach, Adonai Melech V'ed. We say this twice. Now this is mentioned, by the way, in the Rambam. So this is an old minhag. We have this minhag already for many years. ועל פי דעת רבותינו מקובלים נוהגים לעמוד כשאומרים על שם מלך. According to the מקובלים, we stand for השם מלך. וכן כשאומרים אחר פסוק והיה אדוני למלך, אבל כשאומרים פסוקי הושיענו עד הללויה, רשאים לאומרם בישיבה. So now you always wonder when you could sit down. You could sit down already after that, but at least השם מלך and והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ, those should be said standing up. So it then talks about what if you're in the middle of praying and you hear Hashem Melech, do you stand, do you sit? And it says that an elderly person or a sick person are exempt from standing. In general, the only time there's really a din, you have to stand. When is it?
Following the Torah.
When the Torah comes out, you have to stand up, when it's moving. But when the Torah is placed in the Teva, or it's inside of the own Kodesh, you don't have to stand. There's a minhag to stand, but if you're weak or you're elderly, whatever it is, you don't have to stand. You could teach that halacha. There's certain things I can't teach.
Oh, fair enough.
I don't want to sound like, understand? Come on. And that's... Okay, you can look into... Yeah. קודם ברוך שאמר, before ברוך שאמר, נוהגים לומר מזמור למנצח מאוד מזמור שיר. You remember the one on the shape of the menorah? על פי דעת רבותינו מקובלים, ראוי לאמרו בכוונה כשקוראו מתוך ציור מנורה. You should read it from the shape of a menorah. By the way, the source for that is not so old. I mean, like we're talking about, the sources given the Chida, the Pedioetz, the Kaf HaChaim, Palagi, the Kaf HaChaim Sofer. It's like in the last couple hundred years. ויש אומרים שכל האומרו בהנץ החמה בכל יום לא יקרא לו שום מקרא, וכאילו הדליק המנורה בבית המקדש והגביל פני השכינה. And some say that if you say this Tehillim at sunrise, then it's as if nothing bad will happen to you. It's as if you lit the Bet Mikdash, the menorah inside of the Bet Mikdash, and as if you received yourself the divine countenance. So pretty big stuff. On page 422, an interesting halakha. We have one here. Let me show it to you. Someone gave this to me as a gift, and I leave it here at the Beit Knesset for public use. And some people used to always try to push this on whoever was davening, right? You'll notice that here there is pitum aktoret. The aktoret is written on parchment, and it's put in a little booklet. Yes, and it says here, the Orach Chaim says, Amirat pitum aktoret al klaf mitoch ktav ashurit sgula la'ashirut v'atzlacha b'chol ha'asakim. That saying parashat aktoret on klaf every day is a sgula for wealth and success in all your business matters. Yesh nohagim, there are some of the custom l'omor mitoch tziur menorah ktuva b'chtav yad b'otiyot stam al klaf. Some of the custom to read pitum aktoret, or also lemnatzeach, the menorah. So if you look here, well, this one doesn't have it. Mine at home has it. It flips out one more page. There's a menorah on klaf. Some have a custom to read the menorah on klaf out of a handwritten parchment. You're not really supposed to write these things down inside of stam handwriting. The reason we could discuss a different time. What I mean to say is, you're not really supposed to do this in the first place. Really, it's supposed to, you reserve this type of writing not for the Ktoret, not for, you reserve it for the Torah, written on parchment, and mezuzot, and tefillin. Nonetheless, if it's already done, it's no longer an avera, you could use it. So you shouldn't commission someone to write it for you. And then, perakim shemostim Shabbat Yom Tov, things that you add on Shabbat Yom Tov. בשבת ויום טוב נוהגים לומר אחר אדוני מלך מזמור השמיים מספרים כבוד אל. We add all these extra tehillim before we start ברוך שמה. ועוד מזמורים כנתפס בסידורים ועל פי דעת רבותינו מקובלים, based on the opinion of our rabbis מקובלים, יש עניין גדול באמירתם. They're very important tehillim to say, ובפרט יש דקדק בשעת אמירת מזמור ענו צדיקים, מזמור לדוד בשנותו תעמוד לפני אבימלך ויגרשו וילך, right? Those are very important. In our community, when we're short on time, we skip them. We're not all Kabbalists, and it's really not the end of the world. I want to show you one last thing here before we read the end. If you want to read more about that whole idea of writing on parchment and handwriting things that are not actually stam, on page, you don't have it, never mind. On page 273 of this volume, I'll get a copy for you. He talks about it at length. Why not? All of those things that are there. Let's conclude the book, page 422. בשבת ויום טוב נוהגים לומר אחר השם מלך מזמור שבת וגודל. We said this already. ויש נוהגים לומר בכל המועד מזמור השמיים מספרים לבדו במקום למנצח בגינות, אולם ברוב המקומות נהגו אף בכל המועד לומר רק מזמור למנצח בגינות, כמו בשאר ימות החול. There are different minhagim regarding what you say during Chol HaMoed. Do you say the weekday one or do you say the holiday one? And there are different minhagim. And my attitude on most of these things, whatever is in your siddur, say. Whatever is on your siddur, don't say. It's not the end of the world. These things are not so, I'm not so particular about this. One of the things we do here, the minhag in most places that follow the siddur Tiflat HaChodesh, is on days like Rosh Chodesh and holidays where we have Musaf, we don't say all those extra tehillim after the Torah reading. So all the Shir Shel Yom, the Leviim and all that, because that's not relevant for those days. There are already other songs for that day, and it makes tefillah a little bit shorter, and I always feel that shorter tefillah gives people a little more kavanah, especially since our short tefillah is another person's very long tefillah. So I have to make sure that it takes care of itself. Chava Mazal Tov, you finished volume number 3 of Halacha Be'Wa, albeit only the last ending of it. And Bezrat Hashem, starting after Pesach, HaKadosh will give us strength and health and everything else that we need. Calm, tranquility, all those good things. To be able to continue learning together after Pesach in good health and happiness with the new volumes of Shulchan Aruch in front of you. B'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach.